The president-elect is releasing a steady stream of names that he intends to nominate for cabinet positions. Among them, a stunner, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. President-elect Trump made the announcement yesterday on social media. Gaetz, who was at one point under federal investigation for alleged sex trafficking, has been a Trump ally on Capitol Hill. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has more.
Hey there, good morning to you. Of all the president-elect's choices so far, this one landing like a grenade. Gaetz, a well-known combative defender of Mr. Trump, an attorney by training, but one with no experience as a government prosecutor or as a judge, now tapped to lead the nation's premier law enforcement agency, the very same one he lambasted for years, all setting up a rocky path to his confirmation.
This morning, questions swirling over whether Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz, one of Capitol Hill's most vocal critics of the Justice Department, can get confirmed to lead it.
I don't think it's a serious nomination for the Attorney General.
Praised by the president-elect as a deeply gifted and tenacious attorney, writing Gaetz will, quote, root out the systemic corruption at the DOJ, a department Mr. Trump has long railed against as he's faced multiple criminal investigations, even musing at one point that prosecutors should be thrown in jail, and saying this when asked if he would use the justice system to go after perceived political enemies.
Look, when this election is over, based on what they've done, I would have every right to go after them.
Gaetz often serving as an attack dog for Mr. Trump.
The lawfare we've seen against President Trump will do great damage well beyond our time in public service.
We either get this government back on our side or we defund and get rid of, abolish the FBI, CDC, ATF, DOJ, every last one of them, if they do not come to heel.
And saying this back in 2020.
Maybe I should serve as Attorney General of the United States. If necessary, I'd fire every little kicker at the J. Edgar Hoover building.
Within the DOJ, reaction to the nomination scathing. Multiple current and former senior officials left speechless, calling it insane, unbelievable, and one saying he is the least qualified person ever nominated for a position in the Department of Justice. Some officials raising concerns about the would-be top lawyer for the country having been the subject of a years-long federal investigation for alleged sex trafficking of a 17-year-old girl. The prosecutors ultimately closed the case without charges, and Gaetz consistently maintained his innocence.
I have not had a relationship with a 17-year-old. That is totally false.
A bipartisan investigation into his conduct by the House Ethics Committee had been ongoing, though Gaetz' speedy resignation from Congress yesterday means that investigation comes to an immediate halt. Gaetz frequently clashing with members of his own party, leading a successful charge to oust House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
I would hope there wouldn't be another Matt Gaetz in the Republican Party. At the end of the day, he probably shouldn't be on the streets.
Now, the House was set to release a report of its findings this coming Friday, according to the Washington Post, but it's unclear if it will still release them with no jurisdiction to investigate Gaetz any further as a congressman. Back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you. President-elect Trump also named former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard as his pick for Director of National Intelligence. Gabbard has left the Democratic Party, becoming a high-profile Trump supporter, but she's facing scrutiny over her record. This comes as the president-elect met with President Biden as the transition of power gets underway in earnest. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander reports from Washington.
Good morning. The White House described that meeting as cordial and substantive. President-elect Trump saying President Biden was very gracious. But even before Trump landed back in Florida, he rolled out his most polarizing picks, perhaps testing the limits of his power. Among them, Tulsi Gabbard, who he selected as Director of National Intelligence to oversee the entire intelligence community that Trump has long viewed as one of his greatest adversaries within government. President-elect Trump returning to Mar-a-Lago last night, singing God Bless America with billionaire Elon Musk at his side. As he ramps up the transition process, his new choice for Director of National Intelligence is already facing scrutiny. Tulsi Gabbard, a military veteran who was once a Democratic congresswoman and Trump critic.
It's important that our commander-in-chief have a military mindset. That military mindset doesn't mean you walk around looking tough making idle threats.
Gabbard has since endorsed Trump and changed parties. In the role, she would be privy to the nation's most closely guarded secrets, oversee 18 intelligence agencies, and be the president's main advisor on intelligence matters. Gabbard has publicly questioned many assessments of the U.S. intelligence community. She secretly met with Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad in 2017, blamed the U.S. and NATO for Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and has shared Russian claims about Ukraine that have been discredited by lawmakers. Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA officer, writing, "Not only is she ill-prepared and unqualified, but she traffics in conspiracy theories and cozies up to dictators like Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin." All of it after the president-elect capped his comeback at the White House at the invitation of President Biden. Biden vowing a smooth transition.
Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need, and we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So,
Good.
Welcome.
Thank you. And, politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get.
Trump telling the New York Post that he and Biden discussed the war in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East, adding, "I wanted to know his views on where we are and what he thinks." Senate Republicans also making a major announcement that South Dakota Senator John Thune is going to be their new majority leader. He's the first leader of the party in the Senate since Mitch McConnell, who, of course, had held that position for nearly 2 decades. Thune beat out Texas Senator John Cornyn and Florida Senator Rick Scott, the MAGA favorite. Thune even rejected Trump's false election claims in 2020, but notably he's worked to build his relationship with the president-elect, and this week appeared open to Trump's demand that the Senate make recess appointments for some cabinet picks that could avoid a Senate vote on some of them entirely. Back to you guys.
All right, Peter, thank you. Let's talk a little more about the expected nomination of Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence with our global security reporter, Dan DeLuce. Dan, just first and foremost, what's some of the reaction you're hearing from the intelligence community to this pick?
You know, I think a lot of intelligence professionals are concerned, and a lot of former officers are very concerned, alarmed, and kind of shocked at this selection. However, this is a very apolitical workforce that really is committed to the mission and has served different presidents and served under difficult circumstances before, and they feel like their job is to call the balls and strikes and deliver the intelligence as they see it. And so I think they're going to give Gabbard maybe the benefit of the doubt to begin with. But there are huge concerns about, first of all, her complete lack of experience. She's never worked in the intelligence realm in any shape or fashion. And then, of course, all these comments that she's made that have really cast doubt and really disagreed with the intelligence assessments coming from the U.S. and U.S. allies.
Let's talk more about why there is such concern. You've been digging into Gabbard's history, her foreign policy views. Help us understand her position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and why it is so at odds with current U.S. intelligence assessments.
That's right. I think the best example is what she said about what she called U.S. biological labs that she said were in Ukraine. And that was very much echoing what has been a long-held conspiracy theory that Russia has tried to promote now over the past 4 years, and that's been taken up by some right-wing voices in the West, and that is that somehow the U.S. has some kind of biological weapons labs in Ukraine. The U.S. does not. That's been completely debunked. And her other lawmakers, including Republicans, accused her of parroting Russian propaganda and disinformation and falling into that trap and calling her even traitorous. She pushed back sharply. She said, listen, I was just talking about biological labs, not biological weapons labs. And she tried to clarify it. She rejected that label and said, she's not some kind of propagandist for Russia, but she has been repeatedly accused of being sympathetic to Russia's point of view. And she also has claimed that she feels that the U.S. had somehow recognized Russia's concerns about Ukraine wanting to join NATO, that could have prevented the Russian invasion. And of course, U.S. intelligence assessments indicated otherwise, that Putin was plotting to invade Ukraine very clearly. And he cited many different reasons for doing it, many contradictory reasons even. So she's going to be at odds with some of the analysts in the intelligence agencies who see Russia as the main threat in terms of promoting and promulgating disinformation that's aimed at U.S. and to divide up Americans against each other.
Dan, let's also talk about the Middle East. Gabbard has been critical of U.S. foreign policy there, including Mr. Trump's approach to the region during his first term. Tell us about that now, how she explained that 2017 meeting with Syria's President Assad.
So this is really interesting. This shows you how different the Republican Party is with the appearance of Trump. Gabbard has always been very anti-interventionist, kind of a dove, what some people would call an isolationist, very critical of U.S. foreign policy around the world and in the Middle East. And she was really critical and scathing about Trump's decision during his first term to assassinate a top Iranian general, General Soleimani. She said it was unconstitutional. So that's a real contradiction, but Trump was willing to overlook that.
All right, Dan DeLuce, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.